We'll get started. My name is Marianne Straighton. I'm a class of 1998 from St. Mike's, an elementary education major and psychology major, and I'm still in the field of education. And I'm so pleased to introduce you to three of my colleagues, alumni, classmates, who are also in education, to share their stories with you tonight and hopefully answer any questions that you might have to help you on your journey as you decide on your career and make a difference in the world around us. So at any point, if you have any questions, please throw them in the chat. We'll be watching that. But for right now, let's just get started. And I'd love to have the three of you introduce yourselves to our group.
All right, my name is Kevin Dalton. I'm a member of the class of 2020. I was a secondary ed and English double major with a sociology minor. I am from Stoneham, Massachusetts, but now I live in Warwick, Rhode Island. And I am an interventionist at North Kingstown High School in Rhode Island.
Hi, everybody. My name is Andrea Slavin. I graduated in 2009. I was a double major in elementary education and history. I am from Danvers, Massachusetts. I now live in Saugus, and I teach in North Reading, Massachusetts. I'm a first grade teacher where I've been in first grade for 9 years. But here in Mass, we're licensed 1 to 6, so got to be ready to go wherever I can. But currently in first grade.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Parsons. I graduated in 1999, and I currently work as the director of high school English for a large network of charter schools across the Northeast. I grew up in Quincy, Massachusetts, and have been in Brooklyn, New York for the last 10 years or so.
And Amy, we'll start with you. We'd love to hear a little bit about your story of St. Mike's and what led you to where you are today.
Sure. So I think one of the main things I took away from my experience at St. Mike's was a strong commitment to social justice. And so that was initially what I wanted to focus on. And I was a double major in political science and English, really only because of like the nerdy side of my personal love for reading and all that. So I did an internship my junior year at the State House in Vermont and realized the political world was not going to be for me. And so in senior year, I was kind of all over the place trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I ended up joining a program with AmeriCorps called National Civilian Community Corps. And it was appealing to me because it promised travel all over the United States and really intense focus on the needs of the country. And I figured for someone who didn't know what kind of job they wanted to go into, this would be a really great experience, and it was. I got to work all over the East Coast and West Coast, from Philly to Alaska and Hawaii and all over California, and in disaster relief and in conservation and in education. And at the end of those 2 years, what really stuck with me was the education experience I had, which was working in a couple of different schools in Washington, D.C. And it was kind of the beginning of my awakening to a lot of racial injustice in the United States, and seeing really segregated schools with incredibly low literacy rates was just kind of what I couldn't stop thinking about. And so I ended up joining a program in Boston near my hometown, which was a partnership with Boston Public Schools. And it was a master's program, and it kind of allowed me to decide if I wanted to become a teacher without having that experience or that preparation. So through those, I think 2 to 4 years that I did that, I earned the degree in curriculum and instruction, and got to work in a couple of different Boston public schools. I grew pretty disillusioned pretty quickly at just a lot of the dysfunction that I observed. And that could have been specific to the schools that I was in. I don't want to speak broadly, but a friend was in a nearby charter school, which was something I didn't know what that was at the time. But essentially, a charter school is founded by a private group of citizens that gets a contract with a state to run their own school. And basically, they don't have to align to the local teachers unions or district laws. And in exchange, they kind of have to have the higher bar for some things, like the state reviews their contract every 3 years to make sure they can stay open. So I moved down the street to those Boston schools that I had been working in, to a school called Roxbury Prep, which was 100% Black and brown students, most qualifying for a free and reduced lunch, but they had the highest state test scores, exceeding Massachusetts' sort of wealthiest, predominantly white districts. So it was a really incredible school to get to work in and sort of learn to be a teacher in. And for me, it kind of instilled what has been now a 20-year commitment to working in education. I kind of left there knowing how to be an excellent teacher, with an unwavering belief in the potential of all students to thrive. So from there, Roxbury Prep was part of a network, as I mentioned before. It's now grown a lot. We have 55 schools around the Northeast. And so I moved for a leadership opportunity to Brooklyn, and I was a dean of instruction at a new middle school for 5 years. So those years kind of evolved my teaching and my leadership. And from there, I moved into working on the network side for Uncommon, which is where I'm at now. And I work in curriculum design and teacher coaching and kind of data analysis for our 10 high schools, which serve about 15,000 students. So overall, yeah, I would say my education experience wasn't driven by St. Mike's in some ways, but like a commitment to doing work that was really impactful is something I took away from St. Mike's. And for me, that's kind of helped me sustain working in education and still going. So I think I'll stop there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Amy. Andrea, do you want to share your story?
Yes, absolutely. So I find it kind of ironic that I'm here because I was certainly not a student growing up. I was definitely one of those kids where my parents pushed and pushed to be like, why can't you just apply yourself or be more like your sister? So it's interesting to be in this position right now, but I can honestly say, I think St. Mike's molded me to become who I am. I grew up going to Catholic school, so I was never in town, had a difficult time making friends in town. So I was used to being in a smaller private school community, and fell upon St. Mike's because of sports. So I played basketball and field hockey at St. Mike's. Go Purple Knights. And, was very worried about moving away from home because I was always that child that my parents had to keep their thumb on. Like I told you, was, the one that occasionally would look at a neighbor's paper or sign their parents' signature to get by. So any possible thing you could have done poorly, I was your person. Took the SATs a few times, but St. Mike's was the school that took a chance on me and gave me that face-to-face interview and knew I was a person beyond the paper of what I looked like. So came up there to play field hockey, did not declare a major as a freshman. Really even looked at prep schools before college because I wasn't sure college was for me. I'm a July birthday. I was like, how do I choose what I'm going to do for the rest of my life? That seems like a huge decision. So did all my liberal studies, those first year classes, and sophomore year when you had to get ready to, be thinking about that next step, I reflected on what I like to do over the summer for work. And I always worked in camps. I got a lot of fulfillment working with kids. It just came naturally to me. I was an older cousin to a lot of little cousins, so always seemed to be around the younger ones. I know I'm sitting, but I'm on the shorter side. So I was like, okay, if I'm going to do teaching, let's try elementary. So declared elementary ed and loved writing papers, and history was always fascinating to me. So doubled up with history, and all goes from there. So I knew I did not want to stay in Vermont. I always wanted to move back to Massachusetts. So I did take my praxis, got licensed, student taught in Colchester, made some great networks, but was always still coming home in the summers in between and substitute teaching just to build my network down here back in Massachusetts. And I want to just start by interrupt myself by saying this is such an amazing opportunity, because I did not have this when I was going. So I really had to put my neck out there. And this is such an amazing chance for you to really dive into the network that you've created at St. Mike's and the family that you've got, because I really had to do some digging, but the Purple Knight connection is amazing. So moved home, substitute taught after I graduated from St. Mike's. I got a coaching job at Assumption College. So kind of started my grad school right away, because I knew if I took a break, I would certainly have not been motivated. And in Massachusetts, you have to get your master's within 5 years of your first teaching job. So started substituting, was coaching and commuting to that. And I went to Salem State. Certainly felt prepared by, I thought about staying in Vermont to do it. But moving home was just a financially better decision for me, and coming back here to again build that network for my long-term goal. And so yeah, went to Salem State and was chipping away at my master's program. And I would say my progression as to how I became in my own classroom was I substitute taught, and then from there, people learn to love you and you get your recommendations. And I became a para. From a para job, I kind of had more in my I would say my level of play to be more marketable when I'd go to interviews, and I got a permanent sub job for a woman that went on maternity leave. And then from there, I got my first job in Lawrence, Massachusetts. And they're kind of known for being a revolving door. However, I will say I never would take back my first year experience because the experience I got there, the data I collected, the children I met, the families I got to experience was certainly the hardest year. I was saying to Angie earlier, I'm like, this feels like my first year teaching because I'm going mental, but it's obviously the wrath of everything that's going on. So I feel like right now it feels like 2000, I can't even date myself, 2011 at this point. But so moved home, got my master's, licensed in Massachusetts. Again, that was my progression. Got my first classroom in Lawrence in 3rd grade. Went back to the school in North Reading where I did that maternity leave because they enjoyed my company so much. And I did 5th grade. And I did 5th grade for a year, and now I'm in 1st grade where I've been here for 9 years. So currently, I feel like I've been a roller coaster. I've driven my parents nuts with how much I've made them go mental with my course, but I wouldn't change it for any way. And again, this is an amazing opportunity through the network. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Andrea.
All right, so mine's a little bit shorter. I only graduated in 2020, but I graduated, I'll start with how I got to St. Mike's. I got to St. Mike's accidentally. I was mad at my parents. I wanted to go as far away as possible. They would only let me go 4 hours. So I found a couple schools 4 hours away just to ruin my mom's weekend, make her come with me to Vermont, where she knew I was going to hate it because I hate the cold and the snow, and I didn't ski or anything. So I ended up falling in love with St. Mike's and going to St. Mike's. And I actually see some familiar names in the attendees. So that's kind of fun. But at St. Mike's, I was, like I said, a secondary ed and English double major. I came in that major. So I kind of had a pretty clear path. And then I added a sociology minor after taking my first sociology course and really enjoying it. As I, went through my different education courses at St. Mike's, I realized that one of the really great things that I still talk about with my teacher colleagues is the fact that I got to be in so many different school settings. I spent time in elementary, middle school, high school, ESL, special ed, English, history, like everything across the board. I was in Winooski, I was in Burlington, I was in Champlain Valley Union School District, like just so many different things. So I really got like a very wide range of experiences. I got to work with a lot of very different students. I student taught at CVU High School in a humanities class for 10th graders. And that was an awesome experience. I really liked working in a bigger school. And the fact that was regional, it was really interesting because you had a very wide range of socioeconomic status among the students, but because we were getting students from Shelburne and South Burlington, it was a super high funded school. So you got to see students that were coming from a lower income background getting the same opportunities that students usually only get if they're from a high income background. So that was something that I really enjoyed about my experience at that school, just kind of seeing how that happened. After St. Mike's, I applied for Teach for America and I got in and I worked for a year and 2 months at Hope High School as an ESL teacher in Providence, Rhode Island. That was a fascinating experience. Teach for America was something that I did because frankly, I needed the help with my loans and I needed some support in that sense. And also I knew I wanted to move away from home. And I also knew I wanted to move away from Vermont. I didn't really know where I wanted to go. So I ended up in Rhode Island, which I love. And like I said, I was teaching high school ESL. So I had all grades. And something that you may or may not know about Providence Public Schools is it is currently under state control. So leadership changes constantly. There's always new leadership, school level, district level, network level, new positions being added, positions being cut constantly. So it is a district that is 100% in flux at all times. And that makes it a really hard district to work for. So my first year, I learned a ton. It was my first experience really working with ESL. And that's not something I'm certified in. So it was really interesting to go through, first of all, the emergency certification process and also, you know, kind of just like figuring out as I go. I did end up leaving that job, like I said, actually about less than 2 weeks ago. So very new. But I left because of the support that I wasn't getting at my school. And that's something that I think, you know, once you get into schools, you'll know, like, am I being supported by my admin? Am I being supported by the leadership here? And there's a point where if you're not, and it's, you know, taking a toll on your mental health, you have to make that decision. So I just started a new position at North Kingstown High School. And North Kingstown High School is very similar to CVU High School, where I student taught, in the fact that it is a really big school. We have students coming from different towns. We have really high income students, really low income students. We have a really robust CTE program. So we have students coming from all over the state for robotics or for our business program. So it's a really, really interesting school. And my position as an interventionist is a lot of really direct and individualized instruction. So I kind of have a very flexible schedule. I have students coming and going throughout the day. I have students working on remediation, students coming out of hospitalization, students with mental health challenges, physical health challenges, all sorts of things like that. So the reason I chose this position, honestly, is just because it's kind of taking everything that I love about teaching. Above everything, my favorite part is the relationships with the students, especially at the high school level. I feel like I can talk to them like adults and we can have adult conversations, but then they're also just like trying to figure out who they are. That's my favorite thing about high school. So this is a really cool position. I am still fully figuring it out as I go. It's a brand new position, so everyone in the school is figuring out as I go. But I'm really excited to start that. And if you have questions about Teach for America or ESL or teaching in urban districts, I'm still happy to answer those. Still very fresh. So yeah, thank you.
Kevin, I'd love for you to expand a little bit. You mentioned that Teach for America, one of the aspects of choosing to do that was that it would help with student loans. Can you just talk about that a minute or two? Because people might not realize, how Teach for America works or why that can help you.
Yeah, so Teach for America it's really an organization that kind of only recruits from really big schools. So when I applied for Teach for America, it wasn't like because I heard of it through St. Mike's, it was just like my own research. So I definitely hear you on this. So the way that Teach for America can help with education expenses is there's a couple different ways. So a lot of people come into Teach for America without an education degree. They come in fully like not traditionally trained. And for those students, they come in and they immediately start a graduate program so that they can be emergency certified and they can be considered a teacher, but they have to finish their program within a certain amount of time. For me, coming in traditionally trained, I had a little bit more flexibility with what I did with the funds that I got through AmeriCorps, which is kind of the big umbrella that Teach for America falls under. So at the end of each service year, you get a certain amount of money. It depends on the region that you're in, but it is usually around $6,000 a year. And that can either go toward current education expenses or it can go toward your loans. So I didn't start grad school until I started in May. I'm actually attending grad school online at Southern New Hampshire University. I'm getting a degree in curriculum and instruction with a concentration in special ed. I forgot to mention that. But I didn't know when I was going to start grad school, what I was going to do. Like, I just had no idea. So I decided to take those funds and put them toward loans. So a lot of my friends that did Teach for America, they chose to just like put it right toward their schooling. And it'll pay as you go, basically. And then the rest, of course, you handle yourself. And then if you don't do that, you get it at the end of your service year. So I think I got mine in July. And then I was able to put it toward any federal loans. Private loans, it doesn't work for, but any sort of federal loans, it will work. And yeah, you get it, like I said, at the end of each year. So because I didn't finish my second year, I ended up, when I left my job in Providence, I had to leave my job, or I had to leave my membership with Teach for America as well. So I didn't earn it for the second year, but I did earn it for the first year. And that is, I can use it whenever I would like. And I also can use it however I would like. You can kind of mix and match. And then the other thing is that because Teach for America places you primarily in urban schools, there's certain types of loan forgiveness that you can qualify for based on being in an urban school for a certain amount of time. And also, if you're not in an urban school with Teach for America, you're usually in a rural school, and there's a different type of loan forgiveness. So it is very confusing. But one thing that I will say about Teach for America is they have a really, really great staff, like regional staff, that explains all of this to you way better than I am explaining it to you. And I mean, there were times where I literally would just call a staff member and be like, I have no idea, like, why isn't I tried to pay off a private loan with my education award, and they were like, you can't do that, you didn't read the paper at all. And I was like, nope, I didn't. So they are very helpful with that. They have staff members that are literally hired to do those types of things. So yeah, Teach for America is a great opportunity.
Thanks, Kevin. Something that came up from questions that I would love to hear folks' thoughts on is classes that made a big impact on you, or that you felt like really helped prepare you for the classroom today. And Kevin, you happened to mention all of the schools you were in. And I know for me at St. Mike's, and seeing student teachers that come in now, I recognize that St. Mike's made sure every single class had time that was connected to being in classrooms, continuing to learn about that specific area of education. So for me, that I think was what made the biggest impact on me. It was really spending time learning about students' different types of supports and accommodations and needs by actually being in a school where I had a student for an entire semester that I had to, do a lot of diagnostic assessments with, and then identify the accommodations and supports and needs, and really see that to fruition for 4 months. So I'm curious for each of you. Again, it doesn't have to be from education itself as a class, but was there a class that you felt like really has an impact on what you're doing today or somewhere along your education career?
I'll speak to that because I feel like I want to just mention too, I still have my ed portfolio from St. Mike's that I'm going to date myself if I mention any of my professors, but I still keep it in my classroom on a top shelf. And I do love referring back to it because I felt like the feedback you received on your observations, and all the different interactions you had throughout your years there with all the professors and your advisors. But I definitely enjoyed schools and society, which I'm not even sure if that was a elective that I chose, or if that was part of obviously I know schools is in the title, but it just took you through the history of how education in the United States has really gone through. And to be honest, it's so funny because teaching through a pandemic, especially 6-year-olds. So let's try to attempt that. But being remote and now coming back this year with everyone in the room and sitting in individual rows, like I felt like I was back in my schools and society class in St. Mike's, St. Ed's, and just thinking back to like everyone's in a row and you teach to one behavior, you teach to one learning style. And I'm like, this is so not how it's supposed to be. So I definitely enjoyed that because I felt like that gave me a very rich history of how far it's come. And to Amy's point, still a lot of issues that have not been resolved over the years. And it's funny to see history kind of repeat itself in not at the best manner, but obviously knowing the history that we had, just to learn from that past. So I appreciated that class.
Thanks, Andrea.
Yeah, I can say, like I mentioned, I wasn't an ed major, but I was a double major in English literature. And that's kind of what allowed me to go into education. If you want to teach in upper middle school or high school, you need to really have content expertise. And so like many people have mentioned, a lot of states give you 5 years to get your license, but you have to show that you really know the content. And so I went back to my Norton anthology English literature, which is actually still next to my desk because I'm still working in English literature, but that was definitely helpful.
Yeah, I definitely want to agree with schools and society for all the same reasons, Andrea. And also, when I took inclusion with Professor Doyle, I feel like, especially with what I'm doing right now and when I was working in ESL, like it's just all differentiation all the time. Even if you have what looks like a homogeneous class, you don't. And it is literally all differentiation all the time. And something that I notice when I work with other teachers is that they didn't have that class, or they didn't have the same experience differentiating. And I do it so subconsciously because Professor Doyle is so good at what she does. And I just like, people are always amazed, and I'm like, that's just how you do it. That's just how you teach. So I think that it was a huge thing. And also service trips. I'll say I did a lot with Move. And I went on a service trip to Buffalo, New York. I don't know if they're doing that this year, but I know they've done it for years and years. And I worked in a school, and that was the reason I wanted to teach for America. So.
This question is sort of connected, but is there anything you wish you knew before you started teaching? I feel like it's a trick question, right? Because the world of teaching is so much bigger than anything you could like jam in your brain before you started. But if there was something that you're like, if someone just told me this beforehand, what would that be?
I would say, I wish I knew it went beyond your teaching hours. Not that I picked it for the summer vacations and the hours, but it is amazing how even after so long, you're constantly trying to find ways to make your year better or make your classroom more organized. And I feel like, you will find yourself to, to Kevin's point, it's like, once you find your school, you know it. And it does take a long time to jump around. And I was in a district where I was like a paraprofessional for years, and I kept getting rejected as a classroom teacher. And I'm like, I just don't understand, because I've invested so much time into your district and really worked so diligently and only committed to you for years. And it kind of took me stepping out and branching out. And I will say, now that I've been in North Reading for the longest part of my career, you still do meet those teachers that are like, well, that's not my job. And I want to say, you got into the wrong profession. It's a profession. To me, it's a profession, not a job. I don't, I think we go above and beyond our description every day. And it does. I mean, I'm 34 years old, but I'm working with people that are younger than me that are like there right when you need to be contractually and leave right when you can. I'm like, how do you do that? And like, I wish I could do that. And I've been doing this longer than you. And on the other end of the spectrum, you still got people who, again, to Kevin's point, it's like, it does come naturally to us, because I think it's also in your nature to always want to, it's part of your profession too, that you're type A, but you're also still striving to keep doing better. And you work with people that are like, I don't have to do that. And it's like, but we know you don't have to, but you should. So I think my words of advice was, it's certainly a profession where you look a lot different than what you see on paper. And I think you just have to have a positive attitude and know that you're not there for selfish reasons for you at the end of the day. It's for we're all here because a teacher inspired us along the way. So I think that would just be my words of wisdom there.
I actually was going to say something very similar. I would say, like kind of on the other side of that, like knowing how to set boundaries when it comes to teaching, like knowing when to say, no, that actually isn't my job. And not like, oh no, like that's just not my hours. But like, if a student comes to me, I just had this conversation during dinner, because we're both teachers. And if a student comes to me and lays down like this really heavy thing, we have a social worker. Like, I should talk to the social worker about it. I don't need to take that home and just keep it to me. And I think that is something that I wasn't good at when I first started. I felt like everything that a student told me had to be me. Everything that a teacher told me had to be me. And I think like kind of outsourcing some of that is really important. And I think it's in the St. Mike's nature of all of us to just like be the helper and like want to do everything and want to do everything the perfect way for every person. And that's not human. So yeah, I think also, setting boundaries in that way.
Yeah, and to Kevin's point, I think 2/3 of teachers leave in the first 2 years. And so if you intend to be in this for the long run, you do need to take care of yourself and personal wellness and all that. And I would also add something that would be helpful to know on day one is you might think about the typical work of a teacher being kind of lesson planning, grading, but really it's relationships. And so like the time that you spend investing in building relationships with all the individual human beings in your class and their families is just as important part of the job and something to spend time on.
Something that strikes me about what all of you are saying is the idea of support, right? And both support for ourselves, right, just as humans, but also support for our students and what it takes to do that well, right, which is not always in the small hours. Something that strikes me about St. Mike's is the support I've had from classmates that have left St. Mike's, right, fellow alumni who teach in different parts of the countries, sometimes in different countries, in fact, that I can always send a quick email to or, reach out with a text. We have two of my classmates just recently went back to school and became teachers that were not education majors at St. Mike's. But they said they felt like half of their classes they learned from being around so many education majors at the time they were at St. Mike's. And they ended up reaching out for support from us as they were going through the process, but they've become such support to us because of sharing their experiences now in their new roles. So, wherever you are in this, whether you're already an education major or you're thinking about it, or you're thinking about doing this after your studies at St. Mike's, and including education in your post undergrad work, know that there's this community that's always going to be around for you, whether it's through SMC Connect and it's other alumni or classmates you have, because that's something that I think is really predominant in all of our experiences at St. Mike's, which is great. Another question someone asked was the process of pursuing licensure. Now, I know, Kevin, you talked about it a little bit because of Teach for America. Amy and Andrea, you have sort of opposite experiences. How helpful was your programs, or how did that work for each of you getting licensed?
So I, again, took praxis and, fulfilled my requirements to graduate with that degree. And then when I moved home, I was shocked. I thought I researched reciprocity so long, and I was shocked. My parents, I come from a family of nurses, and my mom's like, "Are you sure there's not a national teaching test? Like your sister took a national nursing board." And I find it hard to believe that no matter where you want to teach, you got to keep taking these. I'm like, no, I got to. I think that I don't think St. Mike's would lead me in the wrong direction. So I will say I felt like St. Mike's was way more nurturing and not hand-holding, but in a great way, like just more that gradual release of responsibility, right? Like they took you under their wing. They guided you to know what you needed to do. They gave you your 4-year plan. You kind of knew what your senior year was going to look like by sophomore year. And then when I came back to go to grad school and go to Salem State, I certainly saw the difference between a university and a college. And Salem State had just transitioned from college to university. And I didn't have that option to just go knock on my advisor's door, who was Professor Whiteford at the time for me, and just be like, hey, can we chat for a minute? Salem State was like, well, do you have an appointment? They're booking 2 weeks out. And I'm just saying, I just need to talk to somebody. So my license journey in Mass was quite a while. I actually made it into a math problem when I taught 5th grade. And they were like, wow, you owe your parents a lot of money because you failed a lot. And, at the time that was only in-person offerings. It wasn't on the computer. So, you'd go on that MTEL website, my anxiety would kick in right away. And I'm like, oh, just to get those scores was the longest wait. But, for elementary ed, I believe I had to pass 5 tests, whereas praxis was 3. You have your general communications and literacy, which is like correcting your grammar, your sentences. Can you write an essay? And then from there, based on your topic that you're pursuing for licensure for elementary ed, it was a general curriculum. And then they added a math subtest in my transition, which was awesome. Just when you think you only had to take 4, they added a 5th. And then the last test you had to take was a foundations of reading, which I find my experience with kids who are with English as a second language, I'm like, wow, this would have been so this is exactly, back to that differentiation piece. This would have been a great course when I was working with those ESL kids to pursue all my hours. But so like I said, I'm not much of a student, and here I am at my age still admitting I'm not much of a student, which is why I think I bond with all those kids. I failed a lot and pursued a lot of tutoring, pursued a lot of flyers that were left on my dashboard or my windshield, when I'd come out of those sites, but took a long time. But I believe in Massachusetts, you're either early childhood, which is pre-K to 2, and then you can go elementary, which is 1 to 6.
I think things may have changed a bit, but when I was pursuing license, I knew I wanted to teach older students. And so I had to just do, in Massachusetts, communication and literacy, and then English 7-12. And so that's really where my English literature major, as well as some good old fashioned test prep, came into play. So that was just really passing that test. And as I mentioned, charter schools kind of have some different guidance. And so I was able to get hired with just the contingent that I would pass that test. It didn't have to happen before I started. Yeah, so it looks like that's still true.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but yes, I had gotten my first job in Lawrence with still needing to pass the 5th test, my foundations of reading. So I had, all you had to do is print out your tickets and prove that you had passed
Yeah.
your others. And then they have a very good working relationship knowing you're working towards it.
Okay, I have one more question I'm going to ask, but if anyone's on in the webinar right now and wants to make sure we answer one of your questions, please put it in the chat so that we can do that while we're all together. The question I would love to hear from each of you is, I know sometimes we have folks that aren't sure what they'd want to do in education. They know they want to be somewhere in a school, and each of you have mentioned some different elements or different types of roles that you can play. Are there other roles that you see at your school, maybe not one you've discussed yet, that you think is worth throwing out there to some of the folks that might be on the call tonight?
In our elementary schools, we had just hired an SEL, so a social emotional counselor. So this obviously seems to be the new wave of, the social emotional learning in the best interest of our students. And I wish at the elementary level, we have a school psychologist, but they're primarily just those people that test for any concerns you see in the academic classroom. And you do miss that piece if you have an issue at home, or if a child comes in complaining about something that's concerning. It's a habit to be like, can you go see our doctor so-and-so in the office? But you realize like that's also taking her away or him away from pursuing some testing opportunities that they might need to fulfill. So we are trying to push in our district to really get a counselor, which is separate from a school psychologist, because we find, so that's why we've now hired a social emotional counselor that's part-time, and they visit between all 3 elementary schools in my district. So we get her for one day. She visits your classroom on a 3-week cycle. So it's still not enough, but it's a great start in the right direction. So I would say that the counselor piece seems to be a new wave coming up.
Yeah, something else is like sort of on both ends of the spectrum. A lot of our schools hire apprentice teachers as a 1 or 2 year program. If you sort of aren't ready to become a full-time classroom lead. And the apprentice program is a really great opportunity to sort of work as a paraprofessional, like co-teacher in a few different classes, and get to observe and learn the school culture and decide if it's a place for you. So that's definitely something I'd recommend looking into. And then also we have a lot of opportunities for promotion. So teachers that want to stay teachers, but take on grade level chair roles or department chair positions. And doing things like that while I was a teacher, like I think allowed me to move into district level leadership eventually.
I will say also something that's growing a ton in every school, but especially in big schools, are things like coaching, intervention, different types of special education. So like, I think I kind of had a preconceived notion of like what a special educator looks like. Like they're either full, like, individualized instruction with just a class of special ed, or they're push in or they're pull out, and that's it. But coaching is a huge thing that's growing. You're seeing it like literally all over the place, usually literacy coaching and math coaching. So literacy kind of takes the English side of things, and then obviously math is math. And then also like the position I'm in is a brand new position at my school. And it's because the need is growing. So there's a need for more individualized instruction. We're finally catching up to, I think, what people in education know is that like students need extra support. And like Andrea, what you just mentioned with all the like social emotional learning, and then kind of that push to really get that into schools and not just have it as this abstract idea. So I think there's going to be more and more opportunities as the years go on for more individualized positions like that. So, I think starting in a classroom is an absolutely wonderful way. But if that's something you're interested in, it's definitely something that's going to be there.
And that brings up paraprofessionals and some of the other types of roles, because sometimes there's paraprofessionals that will be a one-on-one support for a student through the special education route, or there'll be paraprofessionals that will work with a whole classroom, similar to what Amy's saying. I wish they were all called apprentice teachers. Some school districts, there's a wide range of requirements or recommendations. And so really getting to understand a school district will help you, or a school setting will help you not only know what the role would be, but gives you a sense of the vision and mission of that school, because the way they, design those roles and how they talk about them says a lot about what they believe about students and about teachers and about learning. So, listen with sort of some subtext in those conversations that may help. Has anyone have any other thoughts about paraprofessionals or had held any roles that you would like to talk about for paraeducators? It's a great way to get your foot into a school district that you might be interested in, but they don't have any openings for full classroom teachers. A lot of times principals and those folks who are on the panel for hiring, really it makes a difference because they see what you're like, not just for an interview, but as an educator in their school building, and they'll advocate for you when it comes to the interview process. So if you know what the school you want to be in.
Yes, I was just going to speak to that. I found para jobs through School Spring, which is a huge search engine we use around here. I'm sure it's globally popular, but I know that was a really popular one around here. And then just going on different districts' websites, and to your point, is just making sure, like Marianne said, kind of see what everyone's philosophy is. A lot of schools have like a phrase that they go by. Ours is hand in hand, together we can. And just reading every school's like vision for the school year, or seeing what they do for academics. We're a really big school in STEM, so that's science, technology, and engineering and math piece. So we've gotten a lot of people who are pursuing like a technology career, but want to see what it's like in the school background. So that's how they've kind of gotten their foot in our door. So I would just say, like, research, if you're honing in on where you want to settle, and I don't think any of us ended up where we ever thought, but definitely take a look at their school websites, and you'll learn a lot, and maybe you'll see other surrounding towns and what their mission statement is.
Summer school is another really great opportunity to get your foot in the door. This summer, I knew Providence was not going to be somewhere that I was going to be forever. So I applied for like 10 different summer programs. I worked in Westerly, Rhode Island. It was an amazing experience. And it also was just another good recommendation to put in my back pocket for when I applied for this position. So summer school is a huge way. I mean, they used to chase me out to my car and offer me a job. And I said, no, that's middle school. I'm not interested. But it was a really good way for them to get to know me, and also to just like get to know a district. And you're usually working really closely with admin too, because usually they're the ones in charge of summer schools. So you kind of get that like inside scoop a lot of times. And it can also be fun, and it's also pretty good pay usually, just so you know.
I just wanted to say too, like, for anyone that's thinking about starting to apply for jobs, we are in the middle of a national teacher shortage. So it's really an excellent time to be looking for teaching jobs. And it's kind of reflective of how hard it is right now. It's always hard, but it's especially hard right now. But really, all the schools that I'm working in primarily have immediate openings, because we are down many teachers. And so I think that's pretty true in a lot of places.
I liked your point right there, Amy, too. And I wanted to mention, I remember, I want to say it was like my junior year, I was taking beginner dance and maybe calligraphy at that point, but I had some openings on a certain day of the week in the afternoon, or there might've been one day where I didn't have classes, and I actually contacted, it was Colchester, because I knew I'd be in that area, but Winooski and as you know, all those surrounding towns, but maybe try to substitute in the area if you're fortunate enough to have a car or transportation. And that was a way I kind of got to know what the school districts were like up there prior to student teaching. Was if I knew I had one dedicated day without classes, I would call that secretary and just say, hi, I'm a student at St. Mike's, and I'm interested in substitute teaching. If you need anything, you can call me the morning of or the night before. And I certainly got a lot of, got my feet wet in the making by going to substitute within the area.
Well, I know folks may be heading off to the next seminars that will be starting at 8 o'clock, but I really want to thank everyone for being here today, especially our panelists today. For those of you who are online attending tonight, know that you have at least the 4 of us right here. At any time, if you need something, we are rooting for you. We're here for questions. You can follow our link on the website to find us, as well as SMC Connect. But we're just really excited for your journeys ahead. And I really want to thank Andrea, Kevin, and Amy for sharing their journeys to today.